Argentines, good evening. In accordance with the provisions of our national constitution, tonight we will be sending the 2026 budget project to the National Congress for its evaluation. This budget, like the budget sent last year, maintains fiscal balance. Today, the future of Argentina fundamentally depends on one thing: that the people and politics commit to fiscal order. If we respect fiscal balance, if we achieve that basic consensus, we are assured of unimaginable growth after decades of stagnation. If we fail, we will fall back into the pit of uncontrolled inflation and the destruction of all expectations for the country. In this sense, the national budget is not a mere bill. It is a ratification of our unwavering commitment to move the country forward. Fiscal balance is the cornerstone of our government plan and is a non-negotiable principle that we have a compact with society since the beginning, since our administration. No country in the world can function properly without a balanced budget. That is why politicians around the world are finding consensus and agreements to pass the law of laws. We understand that fiscal balance may seem like a mere whim, but it is neither more nor less than a definitive solution to the problems that have plagued Argentina for decades. However, this solution has long development times. Like any real solution, along this path, the successes that our program has had and continues to have are similar to the foundations in the construction of a building. They are the first necessary step to develop the work. They are its essential components, since without the foundations the building collapses. We celebrate these successes because we know how important they are. We celebrate the sustained drop in inflation, the reduction in poverty, the reduction in taxes, and the end of the CEPO's great achievements because they are indeed. But it is also true that during these 20 long years, many Argentines have lost everything and things have gotten worse and worse for them. That is why I want to tell all Argentines that regardless of the success our administration has had in correcting the decades-long disaster, we understand that many still do not perceive it in their material reality. I would like to emphasize that given the way the government plan was set up, the hardest years to face were the first ones, and that is why we can say, as we have done on so many other occasions and despite the current turbulence, that the worst is over. That is why I want to thank you once again for the enormous support you have shown throughout this first term. You are the protagonists of this program. You are the protagonists of this process. You are the ones who have embarked on the arduous path of growing and embracing the ideas of freedom, which are none other than those of a mature nation. The spirit of Argentines is heroic, and that is why I want to thank you. But I also want to be clear about one thing. When I say that the course is set in stone and that fiscal balance is not negotiable, I do not say it on a whim or personal preference. I say this because doing what we are doing is the only way for Argentina to definitively emerge from the cycle of consecutive disenchantment in which we have lived for decades. There is no other path than fiscal balance, monetary order, and therefore exchange rate order. We must understand once and for all that there is a direct relationship between fiscal order, the reduction of country risk, economic growth, and prosperity. All other paths have already been tried and failed. They failed miserably. We must not fall prey to the false dilemmas that they want to propose to us. It is not through a fiscal deficit that we will address the needs of the most vulnerable. In fact, that remedy has proven to be worse than the disease. The path of a fiscal deficit financed by issuing money has already been tried and led us to the return of uncontrolled inflation and stagnation. The path of fiscal deficit financed with debt has already been tested and led us to inherit a public debt of $500 billion in a history that has shown us to be serial defaulters, which is why the markets punish us, even though we are one of the 5 countries in the world that have a balanced budget. In other words, all possible experiments were tested in this country by the most varied alchemists of the economy. For more than 100 years, we were the laboratory of the most outlandish theories, because politicians had the recipe to be able to spend more without consequences. For decades, they told us that we could get out of the crisis supposedly by stimulating consumption, which is a euphemism for printing more money. And so all kinds of politicians have been trying to get out of the crisis, supposedly by stimulating consumption, which is the euphemism for printing more money. The result is that we are the only country that went from being a developed country to an underdeveloped country. We even got to the point of becoming the only country in a region that has not grown in the last 15 years. For this very reason, from the very beginning, we stated that the problem was not the cook, but the recipe. And although some may believe that they have already seen this, those who say this are wrong. They have never seen anything like what our administration is carrying out, because what has changed is the recipe. The last time Argentina had a fiscal surplus without being in default was more than 120 years ago. No living Argentine has ever experienced the Argentina that we are building. It is precisely for this reason that sometimes we get overly enthusiastic, because we are excited about the future that we see on the horizon. But it is also precisely for this reason that this time the effort that all Argentines are making is worth it. This project that we are presenting today, like the one we presented last year, seeks to ensure that our economic and reform program has legal and administrative support and the backing of Congress. This project is based on an unbreakable fiscal rule, as I mentioned before. It is proposed with a primary surplus such that at the end of the fiscal year, Argentina will have a fiscal surplus, or in the worst case, a fiscal balance. Our commitment to the path of fiscal balance is that this budget presents the lowest level of spending at the national level in relation to GDP in the last 30 years. To give you an idea, the level of national spending is below the level of spending of the provinces for the first time since the 90s. In turn, this budget has financing restrictions preventing the Treasury from financing itself through the central bank, because this would imply issuing money and returning to the inflationary hell. It also presents a fiscal stability rule, that is, if income falls or expenses exceed expectations, items must be adjusted to maintain fiscal balance. This budget allocates 4.8 billion pesos to national universities. It increases spending on pensions by 5% and on health by 17%, both items above inflation. Spending on education also increases by 8% above inflation. On the other hand, having carried out the pertinent audits, the amount received by each pensioner due to disability will also increase by 5% above inflation in 2026. Ultimately, if the budget is the government's plan, and 85% of this budget will be allocated to education, health and retirement, that means that the priority of this government, as we have always said, is human capital. Likewise, this budget is the first budget in Argentine history to include the regime of extinction of reciprocal obligations to continue rebuilding the relationship between the national state and the provinces. This is a historical debt that we must resolve as a country, but it must be addressed with a firm commitment to fiscal balance, and for this reason it will have a specific budget within the law of laws. In addition, we would insist on restoring the much maligned presumption of tax innocence. For this very reason, we seek to create a simplified regime for sworn declaration of income. That's it. The idea that the state would consider all its citizens as criminals in a preventive manner is absurd. But the budget is not just a piece of paper without consequences. It is the roadmap for where we are headed. That is why it is important for Argentines to understand what a country with fiscal balance and no inflation looks like. According to various studies, Argentina would achieve a base growth of 5% per year simply by achieving fiscal balance and maintaining it over time. To put that in context, between 2011 and 2023, Argentina's GDP per capita fell by just over 10%, while in neighboring countries, it grew by 15% to 20% in the same period. Fiscal order and surpluses are the difference between being able to dream of a better future or living locked in a stormy and decadent present. And if we add fiscal balance to the reforms we want to carry out, we could be talking about sustained annual growth of 7 or 8%. To give you an idea, growing at these rates would mean that in 10 years we would resemble high-income countries. In 20 years we would be among the richest countries in the world, and in 30 years we would be on the podium of world powers. But that would not happen by magic, nor is there a magic formula for all this progress to materialize today. It needs time for the work to acquire increasing value, because, as we have said on occasion, Rome was not built in a day. What we are proposing is not a pipe dream, it is what we can achieve if we achieve the necessary consensus to carry out the profound reforms that the country needs. I'm sure that by working side by side with governors, deputies, and senators who want a different Argentina, we will achieve it. The surpluses, for example, what will allow us to provide financing from the Treasury to those actors in the private sector who want to invest in the country in the large concessions that we are going to carry out. That is to say, for the first time in decades, instead of the private sector financing the public sector, this primary surplus will allow the public sector to finance the private sector so that it can carry out fundamental works that build the country's infrastructure and logistics. Argentina is a country that has much to offer the world and that for decades refused to trade with the rest of the planet. We must take the path taken by all the countries that are currently prosperous and seek to flood the world by exporting our talent. On the contrary, if we decide to abandon this virtuous circle of fiscal balance and economic growth to return to the path of deficits, debt issuing and raising taxes, we will return to the stagnation and inflation that characterized our country for so many years, and that plunged us into the most abject poverty. For this very reason, Argentina must once and for all abandon the constant economic self-sabotage of the last decades. We must abandon magical thinking. It is not possible to reinvent the wheel. No one is to blame for our problems but ourselves, and no one can save us but ourselves. We depend exclusively on our efforts and our commitment to do things right once and for all, because we no longer have any other options. It is time to finally accept that if we want to reduce poverty, we need more employment. If we want to increase employment, we need more companies to invest. And if we want more companies to invest, we have to stop seeing entrepreneurs as public enemies. Instead, we must create the conditions so that companies can prosper and make money without their property rights being threatened. And these conditions also imply, by definition, lower interest rates, which are not achieved by printing money, but by reducing country risk based on fiscal balance and stimulating savings. Because a company that does not make money is a company that closes or a company that never opens at all. And that is what happens when taxes are systematically raised. Fiscal balance is torpedoed by increasing country risk. Property rights are violated and the rules of the game are changed on the fly, as we have done for so many decades. Finally, I would like to end with a brief reflection. It has taken us a long time to get here. We have all made enormous efforts to get out of the hole we were in when we took office. In fact, the salaries of the executive branch have been frozen since the day we took office. Therefore, we know that the path is arduous. but we also know that the direction is the right one. We have to understand as a country and as a society, if we do not complete the process of change that we have undertaken, we will have thrown away all the effort we have made. Let us not give up. Let us make all this effort worthwhile. May God bless you. May God bless the Argentines. May the strength of heaven be with us. Thank you very much to everyone. Good evening.